Welcome home, everyone. I'm Angela Rye. I am your host for today. This is my solo pod for Native Land Pod, where we break down all things politics and culture. I'm live on Instagram right now, encouraging you all to come over to the live stream on YouTube. And today we are going to spend a little time talking about Jeffrey Epstein. A number of people have been asking, what do the Epstein files have to do with me? Why should I care? And what I would say to you all is that you may have a survivor in your community, you may have a survivor in your family, you may have never met anyone who's been impacted by sexual assault, molestation, rape. But this is something that hits our community in a really, really big way. There are people all over this country who have had experiences, like the young women who interacted and encountered Jeffrey Epstein and his I don't know what you want to call this lady, Ghislaine Maxwell, his side piece. And what I would say to you is that they have to find the courage, the strength to be able to come forward. And I think what is so unfortunate about what these young women have experienced is that their terror, their trauma has been treated like a political football. It doesn't matter who was in power. People refused to look into the case, to look into the matter, to talk to the dozens of survivors who had experiences with Jeffrey Epstein and some of his most powerful friends. These crimes know no ideological bounds, know no partisan bounds. But one thing that the Republicans that exist in this House of Representatives right now, in Congress, will do is they will make something partisan that has no business being partisan. And what I want to call to you all's attention is on January 8th, the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, which is chaired by James Comer, sent a letter to Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton's lawyers trying to compel them to testify. And so on January 12th, just 4 days later, a letter was sent from Williams and Connolly and Jenner and Block, which are the firms that are representing Bill and Hillary Clinton in this matter. And they're responding to why all of the force, why all of this interest in wanting to hear from Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Clinton, the same Secretary of State Clinton who won the popular vote against Donald Trump. We shouldn't have an electoral college, but I digress. You'll see why she should have been our president when we roll this clip. But I want to just talk to you all just for a moment about this. They were trying to force them to testify. They wanted to do a private hearing where they deposed the former president, the former first lady, the former secretary of state, the former senator representing New York, about what they knew about Jeffrey Epstein. Now, there are images of Bill Clinton with Jeffrey Epstein, but Secretary Clinton, by her own testimony, has never met Jeffrey Epstein. But yet they wanted to talk to them. What they mentioned is, instead of talking to the attorneys general who had this in their purview, in their jurisdiction, to investigate, to prosecute Jeffrey Epstein, you're coming for us. And we don't understand why you're doing that. So in this letter that their lawyers sent, it is an 8-page letter where they talk about why this is so beyond the scope of what they should be doing in their investigation, why they're not the right people for them to talk to. And they said, nonetheless, we will come talk to you, but we want to ensure that these depositions are released in total to the American public. Now, no surprises here. The Republicans are rule breakers, so of course they broke the rules when these folks came to testify before the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform last week. And of course, Lauren Boebert took a picture of Hillary Clinton. She was very irate about that, but those aren't even the best moments of this particular deposition. I want to direct our attention to Hillary Clinton's opening statement before the committee, which was about 9.5 minutes long. And I want to stop along the way and tell you all what's happening here and why what the Secretary of State was saying was so very important. I will tell you while watching this, I will be shocked if you can't see why this woman should have been the president of these United States. Let's roll the clip.
Mr. Chairman, ranking member, members of the committee, as a former United States senator, I have respect for legislative oversight, and I expect its exercise, as do the American people, to be principled and fearless in pursuit of truth and accountability. As we all know, however, too often congressional investigations are partisan political theater, which is an abdication of duty and an insult to the American people. This committee justified its subpoena to me based on its assumption that I have information regarding the investigations into the criminal activities of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Let me be as clear as I can. I do not. As I stated in my sworn declaration on January 13th, I had no idea about their criminal activities. I do not recall ever encountering Mr. Epstein. I never flew on his plane or visited his island, homes, or offices. I have nothing to add to that.
I want to stop here for two reasons. One, Hillary Clinton, given all, again, former First Lady of these United States, former senator representing the state of New York, former Secretary of State, former presidential candidate, the only woman who has ever won the popular vote in the United States. That Hillary Clinton is the one that they want to appear before the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. And she takes the moment to say, let me actually educate you on what is supposed to happen in a legislative process. This should not be, partisan political theater. This should be an opportunity for you to gather facts so you can actually do right by these tax-paying citizens who are Jeffrey Epstein survivors of assault, right? She makes it so clear what's supposed to be happening. And she says further, I don't know this man. Why y'all got me up here? Let's roll the clip.
Like every decent person, I've been horrified by what we have learned about their crimes. It's unfathomable that Mr. Epstein initially got a slap on the wrist in 2008, which allowed him to continue his predatory practices for another decade. Mr. Chairman, your investigation is supposed to be assessing the federal government's handling of the investigations and prosecutions of Epstein and his crimes. You subpoenaed 8 law enforcement officials, all of whom ran the Department of Justice or directed the FBI when Epstein's crimes were investigated and prosecuted. Of those 8, only 1 appeared before the committee. 5 of the 6 former attorneys general were allowed to submit brief statements stating they had no information to provide. You have held 0 public hearings, refused to allow the media to attend them, including today, despite espousing the need for transparency on dozens of occasions. You have made little effort.
So what's important about this particular part of her testimony, and this is what they also say in the letter dated January 12th from the attorneys, she's making it very clear that the people who had the responsibility to investigate, to prosecute, to ensure an indictment of this criminal, Jeffrey Epstein, you allowed them to submit written statements. 5 of the 6 former attorneys general who would have, so we're clear, the attorney general is the person who oversees the full Department of Justice. That is who is responsible for filing charges against a criminal that's committed federal crimes. So she's saying of the 6, 5 of them were able to submit a written statement. But y'all got me up here. What do you expect me to tell you? I don't even know this man. Let's roll the clip.
The people who show up most prominently in the Epstein files. And when you did, not a single Republican member showed up for Les Wexner's deposition. This institutional...
This is a quick note just to say Les Wexner, in case y'all missed it, is Victoria's Secret Les Wexner. And he was all in and through the Epstein files. So let's just be clear about that. She's like, he's one of the biggest names in these files, clearly associated with Jeffrey Epstein and his ways. And the American public would want to hear from him. You would think, since this is not political theater, allegedly, that the Republicans who are on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee would have showed up. They didn't show up that day. Let's roll the clip.
Failure is designed to protect one political party and one public official. rather than to seek truth and justice for the victims and survivors, as well as inform the public who want to get to the bottom of this matter. My heart breaks for the survivors, and I am furious on their behalf. I have spent my life advocating for women and girls. I have worked hard to stop the terrible abuses so many women and girls face here and around the world, including human trafficking, forced labor, domestic violence, and sexual slavery. For too long, these have been largely invisible crimes or not treated as crimes at all. But the survivors are real and they are entitled to justice. In Southeast Asia, I met girls as young as 12 years old who had been forced into prostitution and raped repeatedly. Some were dying of AIDS. In Eastern Europe, I met mothers who told me how they lost their daughters to trafficking and did not know where to turn. In settings around the world, I met survivors trying to rebuild their lives and help rescue others with little support from people in power who too often turned a blind eye and a cold shoulder. If you are new to this issue, let me tell you, Jeffrey Epstein was a heinous individual, but he's far from alone. This is not a one-off tabloid sensation or political scandal. It is a global scourge with an unimaginable human toll. My work combating sex trafficking goes back to my days as First Lady. I worked to pass the first federal legislation against trafficking and was proud that my husband signed the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which increased support for survivors and gave prosecutors better tools for going after traffickers. As Secretary of State, I appointed a former federal prosecutor, Lucy DeBaca, to ramp up our global anti-trafficking efforts. I oversaw nearly 170 anti-trafficking programs in 70 nations and directly pressed foreign leaders to crack down on trafficking networks in their countries. Every year, we published a global report to shine a light on abuses. The findings of those reports triggered sanctions on countries failing to make progress, so they became a powerful diplomatic tool to drive concrete action. I insisted that the United States be included in the report for the first time ever in 2011, because we must hold ourselves not just to the same standard as the rest of the world, but to an even higher one. Sex trafficking and modern slavery should have no place in America. None. Infuriatingly, the Trump administration gutted the Trafficking in Persons Office at the State Department, cutting more than 70% of the career civil and foreign service experts who worked so hard to prevent trafficking crimes. The annual trafficking report required by law was delayed for months. The message from the Trump administration to the American people and the world could not be clearer. Combating human trafficking is no longer an American priority under the Trump White House. That's a tragedy.
What I think is important about this moment is Hillary Clinton is laying the groundwork for why not only should she not be testifying before this committee, but she also has a historic record of doing the exact opposite of everything Jeffrey Epstein stood for. So she talked about her work as First Lady. She talked about her work as Secretary of State. She talked about the law, the bill that got signed into law under Bill Clinton's leadership, under his presidency, because of the work she was doing. She talked about 170 programs globally that she was responsible for overseeing as Secretary of State. And the key part of what she said here, while they have hauled her and former President Bill Clinton before the committee to testify, is that the reason you're not seeing this kind of work being done now under this Trump administration is because they've cut not only the funding, but 70% of the staff who were responsible for holding that portfolio of work at the State Department. So she talks about, why is Marco Rubio not testifying before the committee? It's not because Jeffrey Epstein's case is in his purview. It's because he has the ability, the authority, the latitude to take this problem, this global issue, this global crisis by the horns and deploy staff and programs to ensure that women and girls are not trafficked. People are not trafficked. Well, He would if the Trump administration hadn't cut the funding. Let's keep rolling.
Scandal, and it deserves vigorous investigation and oversight. A committee endeavoring to stopping human trafficking would seek to understand what specific steps are needed to fix a legal system that allowed Epstein to get away with his crimes. A committee run by elected officials with a commitment to transparency would ensure the full release of all the files. It would ensure that the lawful redactions of those files protected the victims and survivors, not powerful men and political allies. It would get to the bottom of reports that DOJ withheld FBI interviews in which a survivor accuses President Trump of crimes. It would subpoena anyone who asked on which night there would be the wildest party on Epstein's island. It would demand testimony from prosecutors from Florida, New York, and the Department of Justice about why they gave Epstein a sweetheart deal and chose not to pursue others who may have been implicated in his crimes. And it would demand that Secretary Rubio and Attorney General Bondi testify about why this administration is abandoning survivors and playing into the hands of traffickers. It would seek out advocates and law enforcement officials on the front lines of the fight against human trafficking and ask them what support they need. And it would put forth legislation to provide more resources and force this administration to act. But that's not happening. Instead, you have compelled me to testify, fully aware that I have no knowledge that would assist your investigation in order to distract from President Trump's actions and to cover them up despite legitimate calls for answers. If this committee is serious about learning the truth about Epstein's trafficking crimes, it would not rely on press gaggles to get answers from our current president on his involvement. It would ask him directly under oath about the tens of thousands of times he shows up in the Epstein files. If the majority was serious.
What I love about what she's doing here is she's telling them how the committee should be running its investigation. And one key fact that I skipped over or haven't had the opportunity to bring up just yet is Hillary Clinton didn't just pop up, y'all, one day as the First Lady of the United States. Hillary Clinton was a former Watergate staffer. That's right. Hillary Clinton was on the Nixon impeachment committee understanding, uncovering what happened at Watergate. She's telling them, let me give you the formula, the breakdown, the blueprint for how this is actually supposed to go. Instead of me testifying because you guys think it makes for a salacious headline or fodder on your crazy right-wing blogs, you should be talking to the people who can actually inform you on this investigation to protect women who have been trafficked and sexually assaulted. Not wasting your time on me because y'all love to hate Hillary. Let's roll the clip.
Waste time on fishing expeditions. There is too much to be done. What is being held back? Who is being protected? And why the cover-up? So my challenge to you, Mr. Chairman, and members of this committee is the same challenge I put to myself throughout my long service to this nation. How to be worthy of the trust of the American people that they have given to you. They expect statesmanship, not gamesmanship, leading, not grandstanding. And they expect you to use your power to get to the truth and to do more to help survivors of Epstein's crimes, as well as the millions more who are victims of sex trafficking in this country and around the world. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would also like to request that the video of this deposition be made available within 24 hours, as it has been for other witnesses.
I don't know why this woman was not the president of these United States. But when I tell y'all, I am so happy to be born on October 26th, like Hillary Rodham Clinton. Y'all, she was phenomenal. Phenomenal. And I think part of it, to me, is the class, the poise the moments where she was tested to her core, she showed up brilliantly. Like she should do a master class on how to testify in a hostile environment, because that's exactly where she was. She was on, in a battle. And in that last part where she says, the American people expect statesmanship, not gamesmanship. They expect leading and not grandstanding, is exactly the point. And she's like, you can release the tape, because I know when I'm standing on business. I'm clear about the fact that I don't know this man. Y'all are not about to make me know this man. But there was a moment that tested Hillary Rodham Clinton, and I thought she might come across the table on this lady. Now, Nancy Mace represents a district in South Carolina, wants to run for governor, I believe, and, really traffics in pissing people off. She's masterful at it, and also being on the wrong side of history. You've seen her in a battle in committee rooms against Jasmine Crockett, and she really she pushes things too far. I think in this moment, if I had to extend compassion at all, it would be because Nancy Mace has regularly talked about being a survivor herself, and because of that, I wonder if she was triggered by something, and this was her kind of response in the way that she goes at Hillary Clinton. But I want you all to be your own judge of this. Let's roll the clip. We'll talk about it on the other side.
I have two more questions, then we're going to pass it to Congresswoman Luna. After Jeffrey Epstein was convicted, did it concern you at all that you had taken a substantial amount of money from Jeffrey Epstein?
That's an inappropriate assumption. I did not take a substantial amount of money from Jeffrey Epstein. So far as I know, Jeffrey Epstein contributed to the joint committee that was supporting my Senate race.
Which was how much?
I believe I was told $20,000.
You don't consider $20,000 substantial?
I do not consider it relevant to me, because I had no recollection that I ever knew that he gave any money to the joint committee.
So you didn't talk to your donors? They gave $20,000 to your campaign?
My understanding of the rules back then is that there was no coordination between the committee and the campaign. So, no, I have no recollection.
But that doesn't mean you can't speak to your donors. That doesn't prohibit, the law does not prohibit you speaking to donors.
But I didn't know he was a donor. As far as I knew, he was not a donor until I learned this in preparation for the testimony.
Did it concern you at all that Ghislaine Maxwell was heavily involved with people you knew and were close to?
I knew people that I knew her. Yes, that's true.
And you just shrugged, you didn't want to look into it or have any question about it?
Until her crimes were revealed and she was indicted and tried and convicted, I don't think people knew very much about at all what she was doing.
And then how do you know Howard Lutnick?
I know Howard Lutnick because when I was senator on 9/11, the firm...
Quick. And the reason I want to pause here really quick is because first I want to just take a moment, because I know people at home may be listening to this conversation about this back and forth about this $20,000 donation. And this really wasn't the point I was trying to get to. I want to get to something later. But this particular point is fascinating to me because there are coordinating committees, and a $20,000 donation is actually not large. There are people that bundle or raise resources for a bunch of different friends, and they could bundle to the tune of $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $5 million, $50 million, because they have all of their friends donate $5,000. But it's like if you were selling candy bars back in the day, and instead of you being, and I used to eat my candy bars, y'all don't tell my mama now, but you would sell your candy bar, your candy bar box. You would be responsible for your thing to raise money for your school, for your basketball team, whatever. Now, smarter kids would say, I'm going to give you 5 candy bars to sell these. This kid over here sell 5 candy bars. You come back and give me, and I'll make sure you be able to keep $1 or whatever. That's a business, right? And so in a similar way, people raise money for campaigns and they coordinate so that they can raise more at the same time. Jeffrey Epstein may have been asked by one of Hillary Clinton's larger donors to pitch into a larger goal. And it is absolutely normal for a candidate not to speak to every donor. There's also something called call time, where members of Congress, candidates will call around asking for money, especially to meet a deadline, if there's an upcoming filing deadline for fundraising, that kind of thing. But there are a lot of instances, especially when it's a coordinated committee and you're not supposed to be having conversations with a committee that is supporting you, that is very normal because you don't want to run afoul of the law or the rules. So that's also very normal. Now, this conversation around the Secretary of Commerce, the current Secretary of Commerce, who does have a deep relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, is important because here we're getting into the nuance of humanity, frankly. And I think what Hillary Clinton is saying here is really important. Her relationship, as she's about to describe, was centered around 9/11, one of the most terrorizing, traumatic moments for New Yorkers. And this is when Hillary Clinton, was in New York representing this area. So let's go ahead and roll this clip.
He headed, Cantor Fitzgerald, suffered the greatest loss of life. As I recall, something like 650 of his employees were murdered by terrorists that day. Howard Lutnick missed being a victim because he was delayed dropping his child off to kindergarten. You asked the question. I'm going to answer your question.
Now you're going to yell
This
at
was
me?
what I spent
You're
my
going to yell at
time
me.
doing.
I'm a survivor trying to look out for other survivors trying to
and
protect
I
one
was
another.
taking care
You
of
waited
the
6
people
months
who
to
lost
get here today.
3,000
6 months,
lives
and now you're being
at World
defiant
Trade
and
Center.
indignant today.
You asked me
I have
about
met
Howard
with Epstein
Lutnick.
survivors. I'm a survivor myself. You have emails. You've denied that Jeffrey Epstein, that you tried to get Jeffrey Epstein to give money to you.
I did
but
not.
Howard Lutnick was
If
used
you
to
have an
get
email
money.
with me asking Jeffrey
I
Epstein
have
for
an
money,
email from Howard Lutnick sending it to Jeffrey Epstein and his people to raise money for
I don't
you
know about
for an event, an intimate event for you at his offices
Well,
at Cantor Fitzgerald. You're
look,
going to sit
if
here
you-
today
if you would let me finish.
obfuscate and say to this committee, you didn't try to get money from Jeffrey
I
Epstein
didn't.
when
I
there was
didn't.
an intimate event in an email that Howard Lutnick emailed to Epstein's people and Epstein to get him to come to your intimate event at Cantor Fitzgerald, a very small event. And so I'm not going to public. You want to yell at me, that's fine, but I'll yell right back.
Well,
okay? I am looking out for
it's
survivors.
very-
I'm doing
look.
the job that you would not do and refuse to do as Secretary of State. Thank you, and I yield back to
No,
Congresswoman.
I'm going to finish answering the question, which I have a right to do. I am very sympathetic to your personal situation. I have read about it. I have seen you testify or speak on the floor about it. And I very much sympathize with not only what you went through, but appreciate your effort to stand up for survivors. I was a senator representing the people who were murdered on 9/11. Nobody lost more people than Howard Lutnick. You can say whatever you want. You can call him and have him appear before the committee. But I knew him as the man who lost the employees that he knew intimately, including his brother.
And he was
So I
between
worked-
you and
Let her
Jeffrey
finish
Epstein
her
raising
answer,
money for
please.
you.
Let her finish her answer.
You know what? If you don't want to hear what emotionally affected me, that's fine. But that's why I know Howard Lutnick. I went to the memorial service every 9/11 after the formal service was held.
I see what you're
with
doing here,
all-
and you're
with
obfuscating
all
from
of
the
his
questions. He was
people, the
go-between
families.
between you and Jeffrey Epstein raising money for your
Well,
campaign.
you know, Howard Lutnick and I did work
Thank you. I will
together
now yield
because
to
we had a
Congresswoman
lot of
Lenard.
victims
Thank
to take care of, and we worked together to rebuild downtown Manhattan. That is how I know Howard Lutnick.
And I want to stop here. Here's what I think is remarkable about this, and if Nancy Mace doesn't know this yet, she'll soon find out. I don't know how much money she's raised as a member of Congress to hold her seat, but certainly when you run statewide, as Hillary Clinton had done, people will hold events for you. They will hold very intimate events for you. They will be at law offices. They will be with financial services companies, whether it's private equity or venture capital or bankers. There will be labor unions that will hold events for you. And when people hold events for you, generally speaking, there's a fundraising committee. And generally, there are people who are chairs or co-chairs of that fundraising committee. And the chairs and the co-chairs of that fundraising committee have a certain threshold, a certain goal, and the committee members have a certain goal. And they will reach out to their friends, people who they know they can count on, who normally will give without asking them why. There is nothing whatsoever that implicates Hillary Clinton on an email from Howard Lutnick to Jeffrey Epstein for a fundraiser. There's not. As frustrating as that might be for people to understand at home, there are people who are reached out to all the time to go to these events, and they're normally on the wealthier side. We are very clear that Jeffrey Epstein was wealthy himself and ran in the circles of the elite, of the rich and famous of this country. That is the truth. Now, whether Nancy wants to hear it or not, that is the truth. And what Hillary Clinton is sharing is very compelling. This man lost how many employees in the World Trade Center attack, including his own brother? She was the senator representing New York. Of course, she's going to have a relationship with this man. Now, I'm sure she said very clearly, bring his ass before this committee and have him testify, right? So all of that is happening. There's a lot more to unpack. I know we're going to do that tomorrow on our show, our main show. We record tomorrow. It will drop Thursday. We will keep going. If you all haven't seen it, go do the homework today. Go and watch Hillary Clinton's full testimony before the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. I want you all to take notes because, again, it is a masterclass. In that moment, when Nancy Mace was getting her, she said, you know what? I felt that. In that moment, that you know what, my response on the other side of you know what would have been, right? It would have been a full-on cuss out. Hillary Clinton is a masterclass at diplomacy, at being able to check yourself and pause, and being grounded and bringing people into her own experience. She said, if you don't want to hear about my emotions at the time, that's fine. But I have the right to answer this question. Let us study it. Let us hear the truth that comes out of her mouth. She was put in a position to have to answer questions about what her husband was doing when she wasn't there. Not fair. She's been having to answer those questions for too long. It was brilliant. And speaking of brilliant, I want you, if you are in Arkansas, if you are in Texas, or if you are in North Carolina today, I want you to go and be brilliant and vote in your primaries. There are some amazing people on the ticket in every single one of these states. But I want us to deepen into, just for a moment, because it's been a hot topic, into the race of our dear sister Jasmine Crockett. There's been a lot of stuff flying, a lot of stuff that is not cool. And so I want us to remind each other of the greatness of Black women on the other side of Black History Month, and now fully into Women's History Month. Because our dear sister Ayanna Pressley showed up for Jasmine Crockett just this past weekend, and it was amazing. And it reminds me of the importance of sisterhood when things are tough, when people are coming at your character, when they're being racist and gaslighting you, pretending that it's not racism at all, when people are trying to say that you don't deserve to be somewhere. And Jasmine has demonstrated time and time again that she represents us so well in the face of everything that's going on. She has been courageous, and she has run all the way through the tape on this race. So I hope you all, if you're voting today, in Texas, that number one, if you can vote in Texas, that you do vote in Texas. And I want you all to hear from my dear sister, Ayanna Pressley, on why she is supporting Jasmine Crockett. Let's roll this.
I'm very accustomed to Black women being the mule for this country because we carry everybody. When Alma Julia Cooper says, when and where I enter, the entire race enters with me. That has been the role of Black women throughout history. The entire human race enters with us. Jasmine honors that long-standing tradition of Black women throughout history as truth tellers, as justice seekers, as architects of change. So I was not going to allow them to try to minimize her impact, to contain her as a cheerleader for the party, as a clapback queen, as the mule for the party. But the second she answers a divine assignment and raises her hand, now you have a problem. So I had to be here because she is the most qualified. She is the most primed and ready. We don't have to guess about her. We know about her. She's tested and proven. Having cut her teeth on the state level, battling Texas Republicans here, meeting the moment on the national stage, and of course her fine legal mind. And we need that righteousness in the Senate, especially now, because when we get a majority back, if we do our part, we keep sending things over to the Senate that die a certain death. And that is why we need Jasmine Crockett in the Senate, and that's why we need her now.
I love that. It's such a tender moment. I know this race has been so trying for our dear sister Jasmine Crockett. I'm sending prayers her way and sending so much gratitude to Ayanna Pressley, because many of us know Black women who fit that bill, know exactly what she's talking about in every industry in this country. We have been the mule of the world. That is what Zora Neale Hurston said. But we also know that we are worthy of the labor that we give, worthy of every gift, and are so excited to share those gifts with you all. I'm excited to share them with y'all every single week on Native Land Pod. I thank you all for tuning in. If you see a Black woman walking down the street today, just tell them thank you. And I'm going to tell y'all thank you in Arkansas, North Carolina, and Texas when you go vote today. Go do the right thing, the Spike Lee way. You understand? All right. Welcome home, y'all.
Nobody knows the troubles I've seen, Welcome